the silence of the mind. There is a strange quietness that has settled over our inner world, not the peaceful kind, not the kind that nourishes. It's a hollow silence, heavy and unspoken, born not from reflection, but from exhaustion. We live in a time of hyperconnectivity, of constant stimulation, of infinite scrolling and endless noise. Yet, somewhere beneath the hum of notifications and glowing screens, the human mind has grown still in a way that feels unnatural. It's not that we have stopped thinking, on the contrary, our thoughts race endlessly. But what's missing is depth. What's missing is the emotional resonance, the anchoring presence of real connection, of stillness that heals. We are not silent because we are at peace. We are silent because we are numb. From the moment we wake up, our senses are flooded with content. News, messages, emails, updates, reels, ads, one after another, a never-ending river of stimulation. But this stimulation is not enriching. It doesn't touch the soul. It moves across us like wind through empty corridors. And so we adapt. We begin to shut off parts of ourselves to survive the onslaught. The mind becomes a gatekeeper, filtering out the unnecessary, which soon becomes everything. We no longer feel joy the same way. We laugh, yes, but it's reflexive, a conditioned response to a meme or a punchline. But do we feel it? Deep in the chest, in the marrow of our being, or is it just another spike of dopamine gone as quickly as it came? The modern world has taught us efficiency. We are efficient at responding, reacting, producing. We are good at appearing okay, at saying I'm fine while something inside us quietly decays. We know how to keep going. We're experts at it. But at what cost? The cost, it seems, is becoming harder to measure because it's not dramatic. It's not a crash. It's not a scream. It's the slow erosion of meaning, the quiet detachment from our own feelings. We check our phones dozens of times a day, often without noticing. We open apps not because we want to, but because our fingers remember where they live. This is not leisure, this is compulsion, and compulsion rarely leads to peace. There was a time when silence was sacred, when stillness was a space for dreams and imagination, for prayer and reflection. But now, silence feels awkward. It's something to be filled, to be fixed. A quiet room makes us reach for a podcast. A moment alone becomes an opportunity for background noise. We no longer sit with our thoughts, we flee from them. And so the mind learns to retreat, to grow quieter, but not in the way we need. This silence is the sound of withdrawal, a quiet surrender, not a mindful pause. The silence of the modern mind is not a doorway to self, it's a symptom of absence. We are emotionally empty not because we have nothing to feel, but because we are constantly distracted from feeling it. Emotional emptiness is not the absence of emotion, it's the absence of presence. Our emotions still rise within us, but before they can take shape, we swipe them away, scroll past them, drown them in digital clutter. And over time, something inside us begins to believe that our feelings are inconvenient, that they are too slow, too messy for the pace of life we've chosen. So we stop listening. We become high-functioning shells, capable, productive, quiet. But what is this silence doing to our identity? When we no longer hear our inner voice, who are we? When every spare moment is consumed by content that is not ours, when our inner world becomes a reflection of algorithms and advertisements, how do we know what we truly feel, what we truly need? We begin to lose the language of the self. We no longer know how to name our longing, our grief, our hunger for connection. And in this linguistic void, emotional life becomes abstract, something we know exists, but can no longer access directly, like trying to remember a song you once loved but can't recall the melody. There is also a fear that emerges in this silence, the fear that if we stop, we might break. That if we truly listened to what's going on inside, we would be overwhelmed. That the sadness, the loneliness, the fatigue would be too much. So we keep going, not because it feels good, but because we're afraid of what stillness might reveal. But repression does not bring peace. It only deepens the quiet, until it becomes something that echoes, an emptiness that grows louder the longer we ignore it. And the tragedy is that we often mistake this emptiness for maturity. We call it being realistic, grown-up, stoic. But underneath the armor we are still the same, still longing, still aching to be seen, to be understood. The modern world offers convenience, but it rarely offers meaning. It gives us tools to optimize our lives, but not to understand them. We are told to meditate, to journal, to unplug, but these are prescriptions offered like patches on a leaking dam, because the core issue is not the lack of tools, it's the way the world is structured. We are trapped in a system that rewards speed over reflection, appearance over substance, and so even our healing becomes performative. We light candles and open wellness apps, but the silence that follows is still empty because it is not ours. It is not born from inner clarity, but from outer pressure. The silence of the mind in the modern world is not a sign of balance. It is the echo of disconnection. Disconnection from ourselves, from others, from the deeper pulse of life. It is the sound of a world too loud to hear itself think, and individuals too overwhelmed to feel their own truth. It is not a peaceful silence. It is a silence begging to be broken. The silence of the mind. There was a time when human interaction was thick with silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something unspoken, a glance that held meaning, a pause between words that carried weight. In that quiet, relationships deepened. In the gaps, we listened. But now, silence between people has become almost unbearable. We rush to fill it, terrified of what might be revealed if we don't. Conversations are cut short, attention is fragmented, and the art of simply being with another person, without distraction, has begun to disappear. We are losing our ability to sit in silence together, and in doing so, we are losing our ability to truly connect. The emotional emptiness we feel is not just a personal phenomenon, it is social, it is cultural. It is the result of a collective forgetting. We've forgotten how to be present, not just with ourselves, but with one another. In a world where messages are typed instead of spoken, where eye contact is replaced by a screen, something subtle but vital is eroding. Empathy becomes abstract. Vulnerability becomes content. Even grief, even joy, these raw and sacred experiences, are now packaged, filtered, and broadcasted. But in all this performance, what is being lost is intimacy. Not the curated closeness of digital affirmation, but the visceral, unpredictable, unedited nearness of real human presence. We live in a paradox. Surrounded by more people than ever, we are lonelier than ever. Studies confirm what our hearts already know. Loneliness is not a lack of interaction, but a lack of depth in those interactions. You can be in a room full of people and still feel unseen. You can have hundreds of online friends and still feel abandoned. The silence that settles in those moments is deafening. It is not the silence of peace, but of absence, the absence of real understanding, of emotional resonance. And that kind of silence seeps into the soul. It convinces us that maybe we are too much, or not enough. That maybe silence is safer than the risk of not being met. In relationships, romantic, familial, even casual, emotional expression is often misunderstood. We are taught to be strong, composed, rational. Feelings are labeled as distractions or weaknesses, and so we learn to censor ourselves. We laugh when we want to cry. We withdraw when we want to be held. We pretend to be okay because vulnerability is not rewarded in a world that moves too fast to care. The result is a population of emotionally literate but emotionally starved individuals. We know the language of feelings. We can describe them, diagnose them, even meme them, but feeling them, allowing them to surface, without shame, without interruption, that's a language few still speak. Technology has not only changed how we communicate, but how we exist in the presence of others. We are always partially elsewhere, talking to someone while texting someone else, listening with half a mind, responding with pre-packaged phrases. This divided presence fractures the sacredness of the moment, and people feel it, even if they can't name it. We feel dismissed, even when we're technically being answered. We feel lonely, even when we're not alone. It is not about how many conversations we have, but whether we are truly there for any of them, whether our mind, heart, and body are aligned in the presence of the other. There is a kind of silence that forms in relationships over time, the silence of things left unsaid, resentments not voiced, needs not expressed, truths avoided for the sake of comfort or peace. But these silences are not neutral. They grow roots, they become the walls we don't know how to take down, and eventually we begin to miss the person right in front of us, even as we sit beside them. This is the emotional emptiness. No one prepares us for the emptiness that grows not from being alone, but from being together without connection. Children raised in the digital age are learning a version of silence that is different from any generation before. It is the silence of emotional modeling that is absent. When caregivers are absorbed in their devices, unavailable in presence, though physically near, children internalize this as emotional distance. They may not understand it, but they feel it. They learn that attention is fleeting, that connection is inconsistent. And so the seeds of emotional silence are planted early, passed down, not through intention, but through rhythm, through routine, and these early impressions shape the adult psyche in ways we're only beginning to understand. But even in adulthood, the silence persists. We go through entire days without meaningful eye contact, without someone truly asking how we are and waiting for the real answer. In offices, in homes, in public spaces, we wear emotional armor. We don't want to burden others. We don't want to seem unstable, or dramatic, or weak, and so we hold it all in. We smile politely, we say the right things, and when the day is done, we lie awake in bed, wondering why we feel so hollow. The mind is not noisy in these moments, it is quiet. But again, not the peaceful kind. It is the silence of longing, of emotional hunger. Our world encourages resilience, but not softness. It celebrates productivity, but not pause. It rewards independence, but not interdependence. And so emotional silence becomes a survival strategy. We numb ourselves to protect ourselves. We shut down what feels too raw, too real. And yet, in doing so, we also shut out what is beautiful, what is intimate, what is alive. We forget how to cry in front of someone, how to say I'm scared without a joke to soften it. We forget that to feel deeply is not a weakness, but a sign of life. The silence between us and within us is not benign. It is shaping our relationships, our families, our sense of self. It is becoming the default mode of being. And unless we begin to notice it, to name it, it will continue to deepen, until we no longer remember what it feels like to be fully present with ourselves, and with each other. There is a growing phenomenon in the modern world that often escapes our awareness: emotional fatigue. It creeps in subtly, disguised as boredom, procrastination, irritability, or simply a sense of inner flatness. This fatigue is not just the result of working long hours or juggling responsibilities. It is the deeper exhaustion that comes from constantly suppressing what we feel, from navigating a world where emotional expression is discouraged, or worse, punished, from living in environments where survival often depends on pretending to care, pretending to be fine, pretending not to be overwhelmed by everything we are silently carrying. Over time, this performance becomes automatic. We forget we're even performing, and the silence grows heavier. We were not designed for this. Not as biological beings, not as emotional creatures. Our nervous systems are ancient, wired for presence, for slow rhythms, for the give and take of genuine interaction. Yet every day we are thrust into unnatural patterns: noise without meaning, conversations without depth, tasks without rest, emotions without space to breathe. This mismatch between our inner needs and our outer reality creates a chronic state of emotional friction. But instead of responding with care, we respond with distraction. We scroll, we consume, we avoid, and in doing so, we deepen the silence. Inside us, the silence that results when the emotional self is repeatedly ignored. We often imagine emotional emptiness as a void, as something blank or lifeless. But the truth is more complex. This emptiness is often filled with pressure. The pressure to be productive, to be likable, to always know what we're doing, to always be okay. Underneath the calm surface of many lives lies an invisible weight. The effort it takes to appear functional while internally disoriented. And the mind, ever loyal to our need for survival, adapts by muting signals. It dampens emotions that feel too risky. It dulls the edges of grief, of longing, even of joy. Not because those feelings are gone, but because they are too raw to carry openly in a world that offers little space for them. And so, people become emotionally fluent but experientially disconnected. We know the terminology: anxiety, burnout, dissociation, trauma. But these words, repeated often and quickly, can become walls instead of windows. Labels that help us talk about feelings without actually feeling them. We intellectualize our pain as a form of control. We analyze ourselves like projects. But emotion does not respond to logic. It does not resolve through understanding alone. It needs space. It needs tenderness. It needs time, something the modern world rarely allows. The silence of the mind is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It touches something deeper, the fundamental human need for meaning. We crave a sense that our lives matter, that our suffering is not wasted, that our presence leaves an imprint. But when life becomes a series of tasks, when even self-care is reduced to checklist items, meaning begins to fade. We start to feel like machines, efficient, consistent, and profoundly alone. The soul grows silent in these conditions, not because it is gone, but because it has been drowned out. And this silence is often mistaken for peace. But it is not peace. It is surrender. This surrender is most evident in moments when we should feel something, but don't. A beautiful sunset, a moment of kindness, a song that once moved us, now met with numbness. This absence of emotion, where emotion used to live, is one of the most unsettling experiences we can have. It feels like losing a part of ourselves. But instead of questioning why we've grown so numb, we often blame ourselves. We tell ourselves, we're just tired. We say we're too busy. We assume this is just what adulthood feels like, but deep down, something aches to be acknowledged. Something within us remembers what it felt like to be fully alive, and it grieves the silence that has replaced it. Our emotional emptiness is often mirrored in our physical habits. The way we rush through meals without tasting them, the way we move through our days without noticing our breath, the way we multitask conversations, glancing at screens while nodding along. This disconnection from the body reinforces the silence of the mind. We stop feeling the signals, the tightening in the chest, the heaviness in the limbs, the tears that sit just behind the eyes but never fall. And in this numbness, we become estranged from ourselves. Strangers living within our own skin. The tragedy is that this state of emptiness is often invisible to others. From the outside, everything appears normal. We laugh at the right times, we answer emails, we show up, but inside it's a different story. Inside we are waiting for someone to notice, waiting for a moment to exhale, waiting for permission to feel again, but the world rarely offers that moment. And so we wait in silence, hoping that maybe tomorrow we will feel something. But maybe next week we will finally cry, that maybe next month we will wake up and the weight will be gone, but hope alone is not enough. And silence left unbroken becomes a form of emotional exile. The mind is resilient. It will adapt to silence. It will recalibrate to emptiness. It will build routines around numbness and convince you that this is normal. But somewhere beneath that surface, something ancient still stirs the need to be held, to be witnessed, to be known. This part of us does not die, it only sleeps. And it dreams in silence, waiting for the moment when we are brave enough to stop running and start listening. There is a moment, brief and fleeting, that arrives just before sleep, when the noise of the day finally fades and the mind is left alone with itself. In that moment, if we're still enough, we might hear something raw and unfiltered, a whisper of an emotion we buried, a memory we didn't process, a question we've been afraid to ask. But most of us never make it to that moment. We drown it out with distractions, late-night scrolling, background shows, the soft glow of screens that promise company but offer none. We delay sleep not because we're not tired, but because stillness has become frightening. And what does that say about the state of our inner world, when quiet becomes something to escape? This fear of silence is not a personal flaw. It is a reflection of a culture that has made slowness a liability, that has confused vulnerability with weakness, and that has sold us the idea that happiness must be loud, visible, and constant. But true happiness, the kind that nourishes, is often quiet. It grows slowly, in spaces that allow sadness, confusion, and contradiction to exist without judgment. Yet we've built a society allergic to contradiction, one that demands we know who we are at all times, one that punishes ambiguity. So we force clarity, we pick identities and beliefs and emotional labels quickly, prematurely. And in doing so, we silence the parts of ourselves that are still becoming. There is a particular kind of silence that lives in those who have been emotionally neglected, not necessarily through abuse or cruelty, but through the absence of emotional recognition. It is the silence of people who grew up without being asked how they felt, only how they performed, who learned to suppress joy because it was too loud, or pain because it was inconvenient. These people carry their silence into adulthood like an invisible inheritance. They become the ones who comfort others but cannot name their own needs, who listen deeply but speak little about their own hearts. And though they appear strong, inside them there is often a quiet plea to be seen without having to ask, to be held without having to fall apart first. We see this silence in the way we treat our mental health as a problem to be solved, rather than a language to be understood. We want quick fixes, instant clarity. We turn to therapy apps, motivational quotes, mindfulness techniques, all valuable in their own right, but often consumed like medicine instead of invitations to feel. Healing is not linear. It is not efficient. And yet we treat it as a checklist, rushing through grief, minimizing fear, bypassing anger. We want to feel better, but we rarely stop to ask, do we even know what we're feeling? Or are we just trying to escape the discomfort of not knowing? Modern life demands productivity. Even in our emotional lives, we are expected to bounce back quickly, to find silver linings before the wound has closed, to articulate our growth while we are still bleeding. And so we silence our true emotions, not because we want to, but because we feel we must. We don't cry in public because it makes others uncomfortable. We don't admit we're lost because we've been taught that uncertainty is shameful. But the price of this emotional censorship is immense. Every time we silence ourselves to maintain appearances, we reinforce the belief that our truth is too much, too raw, too dark, too inconvenient. This belief burrows deep. It begins to shape the architecture of our identity. We stop trusting our own instincts, we second-guess our emotions, we begin to look outward for validation, measuring our inner world against the reactions of others. And slowly, the silence becomes internalized. We no longer need anyone to dismiss our feelings. We do it ourselves. We interrupt our own grief. We belittle our own joy. We silence our own longing. And yet, beneath all of that, the psyche continues to feel. It continues to send signals. But if we don't answer, the signals become symptoms. Anxiety, fatigue, disconnection, and eventually, apathy. Apathy is perhaps the most haunting form of silence. It is not the absence of emotion, but the belief that emotion no longer matters, that nothing will change, that no one will listen. It is a defense mechanism, forged in environments where expression was met with indifference or punishment, and while it protects us from pain, it also cuts us off from wonder, from intimacy, from art. Apathy deadens the very part of us that seeks meaning. And once meaning fades, we begin to live as shadows of ourselves, functioning, surviving, but not truly alive. But even in the depths of this silence, something ancient remains. A part of the psyche that remembers the songs it used to sing. A part of the soul that still longs to speak. This voice may be faint, buried under years of noise and neglect, but it is never gone. It whispers through moments of beauty in a piece of music that moves you for no reason, in a stranger's kindness that brings unexpected tears, in the sudden ache you feel when you see an old photograph. These are not just feelings, they are invitations to return to yourself, to remember what it feels like to feel. The silence of the mind is not broken by noise. It is broken by presence, not by filling every moment, but by learning to inhabit them fully, by giving yourself permission to feel what arises without editing, without rushing, without trying to make it palatable. Emotional fullness is not about constant joy, it is about emotional integrity, about aligning with what is true, even when that truth is inconvenient. And in a world that teaches us to escape ourselves, choosing to stay becomes an act of quiet rebellion. There is a revolution in stillness, not the stillness of repression, but the stillness of reckoning, of listening, of finally sitting with the silence long enough to hear what it's been trying to say. And though this path is not easy, though it is often uncomfortable, it is the path that leads us back to depth, back to meaning, back to ourselves. Perhaps the most dangerous silence is the one we no longer notice, the quiet absence of aliveness that slips in so gently, we mistake it for maturity, for responsibility, for being realistic. But beneath the polished surface of our routines, something in us is still waiting, waiting for space, waiting to exhale, waiting to feel like a human being again, not just a functioning body moving through schedules and screens. And maybe that is the first step, to notice the waiting, to name the emptiness, to stop pretending that numbness is normal, because it isn't, and because healing begins the moment we tell the truth. The world will not slow down for us. It will not pause to ask how we are doing. It will not create room for our grief, our confusion, our joy. That responsibility is ours now, to reclaim our inner lives from a culture that profits from our disconnection. To remember that we are not machines built to perform. We are beings designed to feel. And even if the world has forgotten this truth, even if we have learned to fear our own silence, there is still time to return. To return does not mean to escape. It means to re-enter, to re-inhabit the spaces within us that we abandoned, to light a candle in the room of the self. To listen not for answers, but for the simple truth of what is alive in us right now. There is no map for this journey. Only the slow unfolding of presence. Only the courage to be honest. Only the tenderness required to sit with what we find. And maybe, just maybe, the silence that once haunted us can become sacred again. Not empty, but open. Not a void, but a vessel. A space where we are finally allowed to feel, to rest, to remember. A silence not of absence, but of belonging.